Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Soul Care Nomad. My name is Matthew Willbanks. I'm here with my good friend and mentor, Dr. John Okinaga. And Dr. O, I've got my hot pumpkin spice latte from a local coffee shop here in Pittsburgh called Huey's because it was 30-something degrees this morning when I woke up.
Did you take your purse when you went to buy that? Say that again.
I don't drink coffee. I don't like the taste of it. So it has to be super, super, super sweet or taste anything other than coffee.
I was going to say something else, but as I'm moving my clicky pen away so I don't click away, and I'm getting my other pen where I just fidget with it. But what was it, the name of your coffee again?
It's a pumpkin spice latte.
Man, there's so many things I want to say, but I'm going to text it to you instead.
Oh, gosh. It tastes pretty good. Hey, I mean, I do what I can. I don't support Starbucks. I support local coffee. Huey's, shut up. Huey's is actually pretty good. From the very minimum coffee that I've drank over the years, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
If I wasn't a Christian, I would totally just go into you right now. That is a very unappreciated text, sir. Anyways, Dr. O, I just want to say that I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you get a Diet Coke and you choke on it just a little bit. just a little bit. But not enough to be life-threatening, just enough to, a little jolt to the system.
Pumpkin spice latte. I mean, come on, dude. For real?
It's pretty good.
You wouldn't catch me dead with one of those.
Yeah, because you'd only drink Diet Coke. So I would just catch you dead.
Yeah, but I also... Oh, yeah. Okay, what's our topic for today?
Okay. In fear of saying something that's going to put Dr. O on the do not hire list of any Southern Baptist seminary, that is what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about fear. Now, a couple...
Come on, that was funny, though.
This isn't a comedy podcast, though. We can't have too much fun.
Podcast. All right, bye.
As I was driving into the office this morning, because it is so cold and it hasn't been this cold, it just, we're at the point of the year in Texas where the weather will literally do what a roller coaster does. It'll just drop and then it'll go right back up and then it'll drop and go right back up. It'll loop-de-loop a couple times. And you never know what to wear because you're eventually going to go from a jacket to like shorts and a t-shirt by the afternoon. But as I was driving into work, there was a lot of fog because I lived near a lake that was coming in from the lake and it was covering the road. And it is that kind of idea of uncertainty of, there's a lot of people that drive in the mornings going to and from, going from home to work. And in that fog, I have no idea what's in front of me. And that kind of got me thinking to kind of this idea of fear of the unknown. Now, we've talked about it in anxiety, kind of what fear is in that instance, but fear isn't just a symptom of anxiety. It can be a symptom of depression. It could be a symptom of, fear of man, of codependence, so many different things. And so we kind of want to start broad and then go down in different kind of ways it shows itself. But Dr. O, in your life and in your time of counseling people, what has been kind of the biggest causes of fear?
Death, money, relationships. I mean, if you're a Dallas Cowboy fan, are we going to win the Super Bowl? And it's never going to happen.
that's not a fear. That is more of an uncertainty that very quickly gets disproven.
Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, death. I think fear, death, money, relationships.
Hmm.
And you're looking over the classifications where fear can come in. You said anxiety, depression. You also can include grief. Like after someone dies, like you're in fear of, oh, who's next?
Hmm.
So something else to consider.
Yep. And so let's talk um, money, the hot topic. Um,
Mm,
of course, our friend, um, Pastor Dr. Mister Gady Humans, that is his bread and butter. So we'll eventually we just need to get him on whenever he has the chance and he actually has a moment to breathe. Um, but very quickly, money issues can cause a ton of fear and a ton of different types of um, mental disorders. But in your experience, what has been kind of the major underlying cause for financial fear?
the unknown. Like what's next? Is there going to be another bill? How am I going to pay this? Um, Unknown fear is when you have kids. All right, how much is the next ER visit going to cost? Or you have a sick spouse. How much is the next test going to cost? And is it a rational fear or irrational fear? That's actually a rational fear,
Hmm.
especially if you're constantly visiting an ER where the front desk worker goes, "Oh, you don't have to fill out any forms. We know you." That's not an irrational fear. That's a rational fear. And so, how do we overcome that when it comes to money? We've identified what the root is. Is God sovereign in this? Absolutely. Replace anxiety or replace those anxious thoughts with prayer. Save. Have an emergency fund there. And some people listen. Well, with how the economy has been for the last 4 years, we don't have savings anymore. And I get that.
Hmm.
And I think that's where also churches need to step up and help. Most churches have a benevolence fund. Be wise in who gets the benevolence fund,
Mhm.
and don't be ashamed to ask for help.
Yeah. I think part of it is, I mean, we can kind of take this rabbit trail for just a few minutes. Um, I mean, it's just what it is. The fear of asking for help.
Mm,
Like,
pride.
yeah, you look at it and you when you take it seriously, you can see very easily that it's kind of ridiculous. I was talking with, like I've said before, I eat lunch with some of my older church members. Or excuse me, my more experienced church members.
So am I more experienced or am I old?
Anyway, so I eat lunch. um, and one of the things that we've talked about is kind of like what makes a man and what makes a woman. And one of the guys said that what makes a woman is her beauty, and that's one of the things she desires and goes after. And for men, it's strength. And I was like, I mean, that's extremely simplified, but it kind of makes sense.
Mm,
Um, and for men, that loss of strength as you get older, that can do a lot. And as we get older, that idea of I'm going to have to ask for help
mm,
because I don't know if I can do this anymore.
yeah.
I mean, that is a real issue that people deal with all the time.
Hmm.
And
And that's why more women go to counseling than men.
mm, it's that idea of, I can't do this on my own. And
Hmm.
throughout all of the Bible, that is what God is showing people is no, you can't do this on your own. One of the things that always comes to mind for me is you look at what is it? Lamentations 3, everyone's super favorite book. The traditional author of Lamentations is the prophet Jeremiah, and you have him sitting in the midst of Babylon destroying Jerusalem. You have a man who has lived his whole life in service to the Lord, and he has been beaten down and he has been cast out by the Israelite people. And now he's watching his home, he's watching his people get absolutely destroyed. And Lamentations 3 is it's smack in the middle of the book, and it has the raw emotions of what Jeremiah is thinking. You can look
Mm.
at, he writes in verse 13, God saying, God, he has pierced my kidneys with shafts from his quiver. I am a laughing stock to all my people, mocked by all their songs, day and all day long. He has filled me with bitterness, satiated me with wormwood. I mean, these are raw emotions that he's feeling. He recognizes he cannot do anything because he is in a situation of helplessness.
Mm.
But then we get down to verse 19, and I want to read a couple verses from here. It says, remember my affliction and my homelessness, the wormwood and the poison. I continually remember them and have become depressed. Yet I call this to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's faithful love, we do not perish, for his mercies never end.
Mm.
They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will put my hope in him. You're talking about living in a time period where the Israelites hated God, and God said, all right, if you don't want me here, I'm going to leave.
Mm.
And when he did that, the Babylonians came in, and the prophet of the Most High God is now sitting and watching all of this happen. He's watching people die in the streets. And he says, yet I call this to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's faithful love, we do not perish, for his mercies never end.
Mm.
What comfort that brings
Yeah.
in any fear, whether it be financial, whether it be fear of asking for help, as realistically, when you look at it, as silly as that is, it is a real fear that dominates the minds of people.
Mm.
But we're not made to be independent. We are made to be dependent on the Lord. I mean, whose breath do we breathe? According to Scripture, it's God's.
Yeah.
Every part of us has to rely on the Lord. And so that brings us into the big idea. And I'll mention this story real quick, and then Dr. O, I'll hand it over to you. One of the gentlemen I eat lunch with on Thursdays, on Wednesday, he was driving in from the field. He was working his cattle, getting all that stuff done, and he's driving in on his golf cart, and he has his Bible study notes, and he just collapsed
Yeah.
in his golf cart. His heart stopped,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a device in his chest that jump started his heart almost, and he lives near his son. And after he got up from the floor of his golf cart and drove back to his house, he went over to his son. He goes, "Hey, are you going to Bible study tonight?" And his son goes, "Yep." He goes, "I'm going to ride with you."
He's not in
And
fear of the unknown.
mm-mm. And he goes and he has lunch with us on Thursday. And, we're sitting there talking about it. And normally we're talking about, oh, this is what's going, or excuse me, this is what they talk about. I just kind of sit and listen because it's kind of fun. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but they talk about, oh, this is what's going on in the world. This is what this country's doing. This is why our government's so corrupt. We didn't really talk about that on Thursday.
Yeah.
We sat and we talked about
Life.
fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And two things I'd never thought I'd hear. Um, the guy whose heart stopped, he said, I'm not going to go to the doctor. what I want to do is I want to use as much of this time as I have to live for the Lord in any possible way, to be
Mm,
there for my family. And
yeah.
I want to make sure that if I go, I'm going to go near my family.
Mm,
And a hardened Marine, a very practical man, probably said one of the nicest things I've ever heard him say. And he said, we still want you around.
I like that guy.
He's like, we still want you around for a little bit longer.
That sounds like something I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Is he fat and balding like me?
Yes.
So
I
you
could
found a replacement for me already?
No, he's not a replacement. He's a military version of you, but
Imagine me if I went to the military.
you'd be a very, very different man, I'll tell you that. Um,
No,
but the
imagine how more blunt I would be.
Oh gosh, I can't imagine. I can't imagine that.
I think
Anyways,
that'll be
that kind of brings up the idea of, fear of death
yeah.
and how that's always hanging over our heads.
Yeah. I don't think maybe I've shared it with you or in class. Remember a couple years, was it 2 years ago? I had that mini stroke.
Mhm.
And did I tell you what happened in the ambulance? Like what I was thinking?
I don't remember.
Yeah. So no, it's probably the closest I've ever been like to die, or I wasn't, but I thought I was close. I thought I was close to dying a bunch of times doing drugs, but no. But when Nicole called 911 and the ambulance picked me up and uh, they put me in the back of the ambulance. In the back of the ambulance, Matt, there's a clock,
Mm,
and I remember it was 11:05 when I walked in when I got put in the back of that ambulance. 11:0 something, and in my head, I was counting down how much time I had left.
hmm,
For whatever reason, in my head, once it hit 12, I was gonna die,
hmm,
and all I could think of was I should have been a better husband. I should have been a better father. I should have been a better son. I should have been a better all in all those I should have.
mhm,
And I think God has a funny sense of humor. By the time I got to Hughley Hospital, it was like 11:40 something, and I'm like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. And by the time they like rolled me out of the ambulance, it was like 11:50 something, and then the clock disappeared. And as I was laying there, I mean, I couldn't talk, Matt. I couldn't talk. My mouth was so dry. I never had such dry mouth, no matter how much weed I smoked. Never had dry mouth like that. And I'll tell you, the only thing that really brought me comfort in that time was, Nicole said, "Oh, I sent out a prayer request for you. Everyone is praying for me." And then she held my hand.
mm,
And I think, like, as we navigate the unknown, we also power of prayer is powerful, but
mhm,
we also kind of discount just someone being there. And we can get into the theology and we need to get into the theology of how to overcome fear. There's Isaiah, what is it? Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I'll help you. I'll hold on to you with my righteous right hand.
mm,
Theology matters,
mm,
you know. But we also have to acknowledge that as people are entering the unknown, the power of just presence, of just being there for someone.
mm,
And you don't have to have the perfect words, you don't have to have the perfect scripture. Just sit there with someone and love on them. I've On the flip side, like I almost that didn't, but I've been with people right before death, and I think there's this peace for them when they're surrounded by loved ones.
mm,
There's this peace that it's going to be okay. And then as you come alongside those who have lost a loved one, and you're just present with them, I'm thinking of One particular guy in California, he had overdosed on spice, and his family was surrounding him. He went from like and he's good, a good looking kid, but right before he passed away, he was bloated. It reminded me of my grandfather right before he died.
Mm.
There comes a point where your body just kind of shuts down and it can't expel toxins. It kind of just gets bloated. Just sitting with that family right before their son passed away. It's an honor to come alongside families
Mm.
that are about to lose someone. It's I like that Marine's answer. We still want you around.
Mm.
And that was his way of saying I love you.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we only say the good things about someone when they're dead at their
Mm.
funeral. And one of the things I try to do is I let people know how much they mean to me when they're alive. I'm not waiting for them to be dead
Mm.
for me to say, I appreciate you or I love you or whatever. I don't know. I went on a little tangent there, but
Yeah.
you brought up a sensitive topic for me, so your fault.
I mean, it's what I'm good at doing is pushing your buttons.
Shut up. It's hard.
Mm.
Death is not a fun thing to think of. But the reality is there's two absolutes in life. We are born and we die.
Mm.
And what are you going to do in between?
Mm.
And and as we navigate that, just our own mortality. And I think you were kind of focusing on other people's mortality, but I think before we can address other people's mortality, we got to address our own.
Mm.
And the beauty for believers is we know where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And even with that knowledge of where we go, there's still some fear there of the unknown. And I used to hyper hyper focusing on something. What a crazy thought.
Yeah, couldn't be you.
Couldn't be me. I used to hyper focus on what is heaven going to be like.
Mm.
And it would spin me bad, Matt. I mean, my head, I couldn't sleep. And this was when I was in high school. These are thoughts I had back in high school. And I think this is right when my mom got sick. And I would hyper focus on, are the streets going to be paved with gold? Am I going to remember my mom? Am I going to remember my dad? Am I going to be able to watch sports? I mean, I'm a teenager. Cut me some
Yeah.
slack. Am I going to be able to still bodyboard in heaven? Like what is eternity look like? And it's such a massive, you can't comprehend it.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, how I avoided thinking, I started throwing darts. I played, this is something new you didn't know about me. I used to play darts a lot. And I wasn't the best, but I was decent.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just because you just zone out. You're just you and the dartboard. You can't think of anything. But what finally helped me navigate it was I told my dad about my struggle about this concept of death and eternity. And what gives me peace, or what has allowed me to just not forget about it, but just it's gonna be okay. And my dad said, do you trust God? I'm like, I trust God. Do you love God? Yeah, I love God. Why would God have something set up for eternity that would be bad for you?
Mm.
And it was just this very simple mindset. Like if I trust God with my eternal salvation, eternity is going to be a blast.
Mm.
And I choose not to focus on that. So once I remove my thoughts on mortality, then I can come alongside those who are struggling with unknown fear, right? So identify what is the root of that fear? Well, death. Okay. That's a valid fear. So that's where you go to Isaiah 41:10. What are some other things that we need to help someone who is struggling with unknown fear is, helping them remind them that God is sovereign over all things. Kind of like that question in the Q&A that I had with my dad, that I'm focusing on God's sovereignty. And then if I'm focusing on God's sovereignty, then I'm going to also trust in God's character.
Mm.
And sometimes, that fear comes about because we doubt God's goodness and his plans because we're control freaks. We want to do it our way.
Yep.
But it's reminding them that of God's character and his love and his promises, and encourage them to trust him even when that future is unclear, which then would lead to, replacing anxiety with prayer.
Mm.
Lay it at the feet of the cross. Trust God that he's in control, and cry out to your Father in heaven. And then I think the last one is obedience. The reward for obedience is obedience. Focusing on, I've used that phrase a ton in class, but helping them with the small things, like, yeah, just trusting God with the small things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the things that the guy was talking about is, I just, I'm not afraid because I know where I'm going. I know what's waiting for me on the other side. And I mean, as believers, we can lose sight of that pretty easily because we get so focused on what we see around us. And that's one of the things that we have to remind ourselves. And that's what Lamentations, what Jeremiah said, this I call to mind and am reminded of.
Hmm.
It's like that idea of remembering that it's not me who sets dates and times, it's the Lord. It's not me who determines everything that's going to happen in my life, but the Lord is the one who is guiding me to follow what he has set out. And I want to end our time reading through Psalm 63. And I want to particularly focus on verse 8, but I'll read up until that point. This is a psalm of David, the little, flavor text before the psalm begins. And it says, a psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. So he is probably alone, fleeing for his life. And this is what he writes: God, you are my God. I eagerly seek you. I thirst for you. My body faints for you in a land that is dry, desolate, and without water. So I gaze on you in the sanctuary to see your strength and your glory. My
Hmm.
lips will glorify you because your faithful love is better than life. So I will bless you as long as I live. At your name I will lift up my hands. You satisfy me as with rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips. When I think of you as I lie on my bed, I meditate on you during the night watches, because you are my helper, and I will rejoice in the shadow of your wings.
Hmm.
I follow close to you. Your right hand holds on to me. That verse right there, I follow close to you. Your right hand holds on to me. David is afraid, you can say.
Yeah.
He's fearing for his life and he's on the run, and he says, you are the one who holds on to me, God. And one of the things I tell my students is hold on to the one who's holding on to you.
Hmm.
And that's what we need to remember as we move on through life. Are you holding on to the one who is holding on to you? Are you
Yeah.
truly dependent on the Lord? Or are you trying to be independent? Because we can be like the Israelites and say, God, we don't need you. And then as soon as God says, okay, I'll see you later, Babylon just comes in waiting to swoop in.
Yeah.
Difficulty, stress, and suffering. One of the things that was brought to my attention as I'm studying for my sermon next week is in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace,
Oh my gosh.
as little Anakin is brought before the Jedi Council,
Oh
they're
my.
sensing a lot of stuff that's going on inside of Anakin. And Yoda says this, which has transcended media and has become something that a lot of people remember when they talk about fear. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering.
Hmm.
Yes, it's a silly space opera. I understand it. But all truth is God's truth. Even in a silly movie like Star Wars, God
Hey,
still can point through.
you watch your mouth there with silly.
But
Madison's gonna come after you.
that's fine. I'm an alumni now. He can't do anything to me.
Well, no, you're gonna do your doctorate next semester.
Anyways, um, but that idea there of fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Fear, if left unchecked, if we do not hand it over to the Lord, will eventually lead to no one else's suffering but our own.
Hmm.
And that's what we have to remember, that these things that we talk about, yes, there are a lot of external circumstances that go on, but if we let our own unbiblical thoughts go unchecked, the only people who suffer truly is ourselves.
Hmm.
And we need to take this to the throne of King Jesus, lay it before his feet, and say, Lord, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I am afraid. And that's what David says in Psalm 63, verse 2. So I gaze on you in the sanctuary to see your strength and your glory. We need to recognize that strength comes from the Lord. The fear, as Proverbs 1 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Wisdom.
Or it's the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom. That's this idea of if we are trying to separate ourselves from the Lord, it's not going to end well for us.
Hmm.
So instead, we need to hold on to the one who's holding on to you. That's easy and hard at the same time. But what we need to realize is it's the most important thing we can do. So, Dr. O, do you have any concluding thoughts?
If you're the one struggling with fear, lay it at the feet of the cross. If you're coming alongside someone who is struggling with fear of the unknown, leave it at the cross. I think the moment we start looking within for the answers is when we get into trouble. So stop it. Like, give it to the Lord. Read his script. Read what the word of God says. Spend time in prayer, and it's going to be okay.
Yep.
Super profound, I know, but hey, whatever.
All right. Well, I'm hitting the dregs of my pumpkin spice latte, so that means our time is up. Thank you so much for listening to Soul Care Nomad. All of Dr. O's good stuff is in the description, and we will see y'all. Excuse me. We will see y'all in the next one.
Be good. Don't be stupid.
Bye, everybody.